Hi everyone. I never thought I'd end up here, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet, but life has a funny way of humbling you. My name is David, I'm 38, and for 15 years I've worn the badge of a police officer in this quiet suburban town just outside the city. Sophia and I had been together 12 years, married for 8. No kids yet, we kept saying the timing would be perfect one day. I was the guy who still came home every shift believing our life was exactly what I signed up for. Steady, safe, built on trust. It all started on a quiet Thursday evening. The kind where the air outside still carried the damp chill of an early autumn rain, and the streetlights flickered on one by one as I pulled into our driveway. My boots left faint wet prints on the hardwood as I stepped inside. The house smelled of garlic, rosemary, and the faint metallic tang of the rain that had followed me in. Sophia was at the stove, stirring pasta sauce with that slow, deliberate motion she always used when her mind was somewhere else. At 36, she still moved with the same graceful confidence that had first drawn me to her, a journalist who could charm a room and keep its secrets at the same time. She turned, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and gave me that smile, the one that always made the weight of the day lift. "Hey love, rough shift." Her voice was warm, but her fingers lingered a second too long on the towel before she set it down. We ate at the small oak table under the soft glow of the pendant light, the sauce rich and familiar. Then her phone buzzed once, face down. She glanced at it, stood without a word, and walked into the hallway. I heard her voice drop, low and intimate. "Yes, Marcus. The party sounds perfect. I can't wait to see you there." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. Marcus. I knew the name. He was one of her regular sources for the investigative pieces she'd been chasing. Work. It had to be work. She came back smiling, slipped the phone into her pocket, and kissed the top of my head like nothing had happened. But the air in the kitchen suddenly felt cooler, the sauce a little too salty on my tongue. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was a journalist. Late calls, secret meetings, coded language, that was her job. Still, that night, lying in the dark with her breathing steady beside me, I couldn't shake the way her voice had softened on his name. Something in the house felt different, like the first hairline crack in a window you don't notice until the storm hits. David begins in a state of secure attachment, typical for a long-term marriage where daily routines have dulled vigilance. As a police officer trained to read micro-expressions on the street, he paradoxically ignores them at home, his blind spot rooted in emotional investment and the comfort of familiarity. Sophia's seductive, persuasive personality has trained him over 12 years to accept secrecy as professional necessity rather than personal threat. The overheard conversation plants the first seed of cognitive dissonance. His rational mind labels it work, while his intuition registers the intimate tone and physical tells. Tightened fingers, lowered voice. This internal conflict, trust versus emerging unease, sets the psychological foundation for the entire story, showing how denial initially protects the self-image of a stable marriage. The sensory details, rain scent, warm light, cooling sauce, mirror his shifting inner temperature, making the audience feel the exact moment security begins to fray without any overt accusation yet. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that should have felt normal but didn't. Sophia started working later, claiming deadlines on a big corruption story. She'd come home after midnight, cheeks flushed from the cold, smelling faintly of city rain and something sweeter, maybe perfume she hadn't worn in years. I'd be on the couch in my sweats, the TV murmuring low, and she'd kiss me quickly, her lips cool. "Just research," she'd say, already pulling her laptop from her bag. Her phone stayed face down on the counter now, screen brightness turned low. Once I walked in while she was typing and she closed the app so fast the lock screen flashed before I could see. I started noticing small things. The way she'd laugh at her phone during dinner, then catch herself and set it down. How her outfits grew sharper. Silk blouses. The silver necklace I'd given her for our anniversary suddenly appearing every day. One Saturday she told me she was meeting her editor for coffee. She left at 10, came back at 4 with takeout Thai and stories about traffic. I believed her. I wanted to. But that night I lay awake listening to the soft tap of her fingers on the screen beside me, the blue glow reflecting off the ceiling like distant lightning. A red herring arrived in the form of her old college friend, Elena, who called one evening while I was cooking. Sophia put her on speaker, laughing about girls' night next week. Elena mentioned a party, something about reconnecting with old sources. I relaxed. Work networking, of course. Yet when Sophia hung up, she stared at the phone a second too long, thumb hovering over a message notification that disappeared before I could read the name. My police instincts, honed on domestic calls where one small lie unravels everything, kept whispering. I pushed them down. Overreacting would make me the jealous husband, not the trusting partner I prided myself on being. Still, the house felt smaller, the silence between us thicker. Every unexplained trip, every late text, every smile at her screen added another invisible weight. I started checking the mileage on her car when she slept, telling myself it was nothing, just habit from the job. Then came the night she said she was covering a late council meeting. She left at 7 wearing the black dress I loved, the one that still fit like it was made for her. At 11 I got a text, running long. Don't wait up. The words were normal. The timing wasn't, because at 11:15 I heard her car pull in, but she didn't come straight inside. She sat in the driveway for 10 full minutes, engine off, phone light glowing through the windshield. When she finally walked in, her lipstick was fresh and her eyes held a shine I hadn't seen in months. I asked how the meeting went. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "Exhausting, but worth it." The scent of her perfume mixed with something else. Cigarette smoke? She didn't smoke. I lay there afterward, heart beating too loud in the dark, wondering how many more worth-it nights it would take before I stopped believing her. David's primary mistake was dismissing intuitive red flags as professional quirks. Classic denial that protects the ego but erodes reality testing. Sophia's mistake was layering plausible cover stories, editor meetings, girls' night, that exploited his trust and her journalistic credibility. The lesson emerging here is that repeated small deceptions create a permission structure for larger ones. Each successful lie lowers the emotional cost of the next. David's secondary mistake, using police habits to secretly check mileage without confronting her, shows how suspicion begins to corrupt the very trust he's trying to preserve. These micro-mistakes accumulate into psychological pressure, teaching that unaddressed emotional distance doesn't stay small. It becomes the architecture of betrayal. I became a detective in my own home. As a cop, I knew how to watch without being seen, so I started cataloging patterns. Phone calls at 2 a.m. that she took in the bathroom with the fan on. Credit card charges for a downtown hotel bar I'd never heard her mention. A new password on her laptop, something she'd never done before. One night I waited until her breathing deepened, then gently lifted her phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up with a message preview before the lock kicked in. "Can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach dropped. Marcus." The next morning I told myself it was innocent. Sources text late. But the doubt had teeth now. I drove past the hotel listed on the statement during my lunch break. Nothing. Just another red herring. That weekend she announced a 2-day research trip upstate. I offered to drive her. She laughed it off, said she needed to focus. When she left, I sat in the empty house listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick like a countdown. I called in a favor with a friend at the precinct. Nothing official, just a quiet plate check on a number I'd seen flash on her screen once. The number belonged to Marcus Hale, 42, freelance photographer who'd worked with her on several stories. Clean record. Too clean. I found his social media, professional shots, no red flags. But one photo showed him at a rooftop bar downtown, arm around a woman whose face was turned away. The timestamp matched a night Sophia had claimed to be at a press event. Still, I needed more. I started driving past her favorite cafes after work. One afternoon, I saw her car in the lot of a place she never liked. Through the window, she was laughing, head tilted, across from a tall man in a leather jacket. Marcus. They weren't touching, but the space between them felt charged. I drove away before they saw me, hands shaking on the wheel. Relief and rage fought in my chest. Relief it wasn't worse. Rage that it already was. That night she came home glowing. I asked about her day. She spun a story about chasing a lead that had gone nowhere. The lie was so smooth it almost convinced me again. But the hotel receipt I'd found tucked in her work bag while she showered told a different story. Same bar. Same date. My mind raced through every explanation I could invent. None fit anymore. The pressure built like a storm front. I barely slept. Every gesture she made, touching my arm, laughing at my jokes, felt like performance. I was fracturing, half the man who trusted her, half the cop who knew better. And still I waited because proof wasn't enough. I needed the moment it became undeniable. Here it begins the first irreversible stage. From passive suspicion to active surveillance. The moral dilemma of checking her phone without consent crosses an internal boundary David can never uncross. The hotel receipt and cafe citing function as the second stage. Tangible evidence that reframes every prior work excuse as calculated deception. The point of no return arrives when David chooses not to confront her immediately. Instead, he continues gathering proof, revealing his deepening attachment to certainty over the relationship itself. Each red herring, Elena's call, the innocent lunch story, temporarily resets his hope, only to heighten the eventual crash. These stages illustrate how investigation itself becomes addictive, turning love into evidence collection. I followed her the night of the company party. She told me it was mandatory networking at a downtown hotel ballroom, dress code, open bar, the usual. She kissed me goodbye wearing the black dress again. Perfume fresh, eyes bright with something I now recognized as anticipation. I waited 30 minutes, then drove the back roads I knew from patrol. My hands were steady on the wheel, the same calm I used on domestic calls. The hotel bar was dimly lit, jazz piano drifting through the lobby. I spotted them in a corner booth. Sophia's hand rested on Marcus's forearm. Their heads were close, the kind of closeness that doesn't happen in public unless privacy no longer matters. He leaned in and kissed her, slow, familiar, the kind of kiss that said this wasn't new. My vision narrowed to that single point. The world outside the booth disappeared. I walked straight over. The moment she saw me, her face drained of color. Marcus straightened, professional mask sliding into place too late. "David," she whispered, voice cracking for the first time in months. I didn't raise my voice. "How long?" She glanced at Marcus, then back at me. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of ice in someone else's glass. Finally, she said, 8 months. The number landed like a baton to the ribs. 8 months of late nights, secret trips, lies layered so thick I'd stopped seeing the truth. Marcus started to speak. I cut him off with a look I'd perfected on the street. "This isn't your conversation." He nodded once and left. Back at the house, the lights felt too bright. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten pasta weeks earlier. I laid out the messages I'd screenshotted from her cloud backup while she was in the shower, explicit, emotional, planning weekends I thought she spent with sources. She stared at them, tears tracking mascara down her cheeks. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, voice small. "It started online, just talking about the story." He understood the pressure I was under. "You were always so steady." I got lost. I felt the words like distant thunder, loud but not touching me yet. "You lied about everything. The party tonight. Every night." She reached for my hand, pulled away.
I'm sorry, David.
"I love you. We can fix this." But the woman across from me was no longer the one I'd married. The persuasive charm had cracked, revealing someone who had chosen excitement over the life we built. I stood up, the chair scraping loud in the quiet house.
No.
"We can't." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, rain began tapping the windows again. Everything we had was already gone. We were just the last to admit it. David's restrained anger, channeled through police composure, directly produces the calm confrontation that forces confession, showing how fear of losing control actually preserves his dignity. Sophia's tears and blame shifting. "You were so steady. reveal guilt mixed with self-justification. Her seductive personality now weaponized in a last attempt at persuasion. The physical action of laying out screenshots connects internal devastation to external evidence, collapsing 8 months of gaslighting in one moment. This emotional to behavioral link marks the exact pivot where love turns to detachment. David's racing thoughts quiet into clarity the instant he hears 8 months, proving that knowledge, not rage, severs the bond. The days after the confrontation blurred into a cold choreography of avoidance. She slept in the guest room. I took extra shifts, coming home only to shower and leave again. The house echoed, drawers opening and closing too softly, the coffee maker hissing at odd hours. We spoke in logistics, who would keep the house, how to split the joint account, whether to tell our families yet. Her attempts to repair came in waves, notes on the counter. I'm seeing a therapist. A dinner she cooked that I ate standing at the sink. Each gesture felt like performance, and I was no longer her audience. My sister called after I finally told her. You're doing the right thing, she said. But are you okay? I wasn't. Grief hit at 3 a.m., sharp and wordless. I'd stare at the ceiling remembering the way Sophia used to curl against me. Her hair smelling of the same shampoo for 12 years. Then the anger would rise, clean and clarifying. She had chosen Marcus over the promises we made. That choice was hers. The consequence would be mine. I consulted a lawyer quietly. Papers were drawn. When I slid the folder across the table one evening, she cried again, but this time without the persuasive tilt of her head. She knew I was gone. I never thought you'd actually leave, she whispered. I looked at her, the woman I had loved, and felt only the faint echo of that love, like a radio station fading out of range. The night I packed the last box, I slept on the couch for the final time. In the morning, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen counter beside her keys. The metal clicked against granite, a small, final sound. I walked out into the cool dawn air. The same rain-scented breeze that had started everything weeks earlier now carrying the smell of new beginnings. The house stayed behind me, smaller in the rearview mirror with every mile. David expected the confrontation to either save the marriage or explode in dramatic rage. Reality delivered quiet paperwork and logistical civility. He had imagined Sophia's persuasive nature would keep fighting for them. Instead, her remorse proved hollow against the 8-month deception. The contrast between his pre-discovery vision of a repaired future and the post-confrontation reality of separate bedrooms and moving boxes forced an emotional awakening. Stability was never mutual. It was his illusion. This gap between expectation and truth stripped away denial, replacing it with the clarity that self-respect required separation. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I kept the house. Sophia moved downtown closer to the newsroom. The first weeks alone were raw. Empty closets, silent evenings, the fridge stocked only with things I liked. But slowly new routines took root. I started running before dawn, the cold air filling my lungs like permission to breathe again. I joined a boxing gym, hitting the heavy bag until my shoulders burned, every punch releasing another layer of the man who had ignored the signs. Friends I hadn't seen in years reached out. I accepted invitations instead of making excuses. One Saturday, I drove 2 hours to a lake I'd always wanted to fish but never had time for. The water was glass still, the sun warm on my back, and for the first time in years my thoughts weren't circling her. They were mine. I learned that betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. The version of David who had dismissed every late night, every secret smile, was gone. In his place stood someone who trusted his instincts again, who understood that love without honesty is just comfortable lies. Sophia sent a message once, "I hope you're happy." I read it, felt nothing but distant well-wishing, and deleted the thread. Today the house feels larger, filled with my choices. Morning light slants through the same windows, but now it warms a space that belongs only to me. I still wear the faint scar of what happened, but scars are proof of healing. For the first time in 12 years, I wake up knowing exactly who I am and where I'm going, steady, clear, and finally free. Across the entire arc, David's journey from blind trust to empowered independence illustrates how betrayal, while devastating, can function as the catalyst for authentic self-reclamation. The cumulative lessons: never outsource your intuition to love, small lies compound into structural collapse, and composure in crisis preserves dignity. Emerge not as abstract morals but as lived truths forged in sensory moments. Rain-scented nights, clicking rings, dawn runs. Sophia's seductive secrecy and Marcus's presence exposed the fragility of emotional betrayal layered over repeated microdeceptions. David's growth is clearest in the contrast between his early rationalizations and final quiet confidence. He no longer needs to dismiss hints because he now honors them. The story closes not in bitterness but in relief, proving that freedom after betrayal is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of self-ownership. Nearly 30% of marriages face similar fractures, yet David's choice to rebuild independently shows that the aftermath can become the most honest chapter of all.